Welcome to our analysis. Today, we will explore Italy. Italy is one of the world's largest economies, a founding member of the European Union, the birthplace of Ferrari, Gucci, and some of the richest private households on the continent. To the outside world, it looks like a dream. Sunshine, luxury, fashion, food, and history, wrapped into one postcard. But beneath that postcard lies a pattern Italy cannot escape, a cycle it has lived through before, and now it's starting again. An economy that once powered Europe is slowing to a crawl. A nation famous for creativity and innovation is struggling to hold on to its workers. A country that built empires of art and industry now faces pressures it could no longer ignore. What's happening inside Italy today is larger than a recession. So join us because today we're talking about why Italy is going broke again. Italy's economic crisis didn't begin last year or 5 years ago, or even with the chaos of the euro debt crisis. The truth is far more unsettling. Italy has been breaking down in slow motion for more than half a century. Every time it seemed to rise, something pulled it back under. And now, in 2025, all those unfinished crises are coming due at the same time. To understand why Italy is going broke again, let's go back to the moment that everything looked perfect, because that's where the cracks began. After World War II, Italy became one of the fastest-growing countries on Earth. Between the 1950s and early 1970s, the economy exploded. Factories multiplied, exports surged, and living standards rose at a pace Italians had never seen before. It was called the Italian economic miracle, and for a time, Italy looked unstoppable. But then the 1970s hit. Oil shocks slammed Europe, inflation spiraled, political violence from extremist groups shook the country. Suddenly, the miracle cracked. Growth slowed, costs soared, and for the first time, Italy started running chronic deficits and spending more than it earned. Year after year, this pattern would become Italy's new normal and a warning of the future to come. Then came the 1980s, a decade Italians remember fondly. The fashion industry exploded, manufacturing thrived, and Milan became a symbol of European luxury. Italy even achieved its famous Il Sorpasso moment, surpassing the United Kingdom in total economic size. But beneath the celebration, something dangerous was forming. To keep this boom alive, Italy borrowed and borrowed and borrowed. Government spending shot up, the welfare state expanded quickly. Politicians learned a simple trick. When growth slowed, they covered the gap with debt. Imagine a household that keeps upgrading its lifestyle with a credit card. It feels good until the bill arrives. Italy's bill would arrive in the 1990s. Entering the European Union's new monetary system brought prestige, but also pressure. To join the euro, Italy had to drastically cut its deficits. That meant austerity, tax increases, and painful reforms. But while Italy tightened its belt, its productivity stopped growing. Factories produced more slowly, bureaucracy multiplied, innovation lagged. Italy simply became less competitive than Germany, France, or Spain. And even in the good economic years, youth unemployment stayed persistently high. In the late 1990s, despite economic expansion, roughly 1 in 3 young people couldn't find stable work. And then came a shock Italy could not absorb. When the global financial system collapsed in 2008, the world went into recession. But while most countries began to recover in a few years, Italy didn't. By 2019, before the pandemic, Italy's economy was still 5% smaller than it had been in 2008. That lost decade is almost unheard of in advanced economies. Italian banks were drowning in non-performing loans. Businesses struggled to get credit. Public debt surged, and austerity policies deepened the slump instead of ending it. So yes, Italy falls behind, and it never managed to climb back up. But believe it or not, many economists think the real crisis for Italy is only beginning now, and that as time goes on, things could get even worse unless something is done immediately. Let's start from the most dangerous fault line beneath the Italian economy, a demographic time bomb that is already ticking. Italy is aging faster and more dramatically than almost any country on Earth. Today, the median Italian is 47 years old, which is the highest median age in Europe and one of the highest in the world.
To put that into perspective, imagine lining up every Italian citizen from youngest to oldest.
The person standing in the middle is almost 50 years old, and 1 in 4 Italians is already over the age of 65. If you walk through many towns, especially in the South, this becomes visible instantly, like grocery stores filled with retirees or entire streets where you barely see a young family. But the real shock isn't how old Italy is becoming, it's how few young people the country is producing. Italy's birth rate has collapsed to 1.2 births per woman, which is also one of the lowest on the planet. Replacement level, or the number needed to keep a population stable, is 2.1. Italy isn't just below that, it's almost half. And 2023 recorded the lowest number of births in Italian history, even lower than during the World Wars. Now, imagine the long-term math of that. Fewer babies today means fewer workers tomorrow, and fewer workers mean fewer taxpayers to support a rapidly growing population of retirees. If this trend continues, Italy's workforce will shrink so sharply that by 2050, there could be 7 elderly people for every 10 working-age adults. Every 10 workers will soon be supporting 7 retirees through taxes, healthcare, and pensions. That's a ratio that simply doesn't work. No modern state can sustain that without either collapsing under debt or raising taxes to levels nobody would tolerate. And this leads us to the heart of Italy's most urgent problem: its overloaded pension system. Italy spends 16% of its entire GDP on pensions. This is the second highest in the entire OECD. That means almost 1 out of every 6 euros the government collects is immediately handed out to retirees. It's an enormous burden, especially for an economy struggling to grow. And instead of reducing that pressure, Italy has often made it worse. Early retirement programs like Quota 100 allowed people to retire at 62 after contributing for just 38 years. It was politically popular, yes, but financially devastating. Most retirees entered the system earlier, while fewer young people entered the workforce to pay for them. This is why many economists argue that unless something changes, the math will eventually break. There simply won't be enough people working to support the number of people not working. And Italy is already running out of time to fix it. And if you think demographics are bad, the trend is looking even worse. The truth here is simple. Italy is losing the very generation it needs to survive. For decades now, real wages in Italy have barely moved. Not up, not down, just stuck in place. Imagine working hard, studying for years, doing everything society asks of you, and then earning 1,000 to 1,300 euros a month. That is the reality for millions of young Italians. In cities like Milan, Rome, Florence, even a small apartment eats half of that salary before you pay for food, transport, or anything else. Now, put yourself in their shoes for a moment. You're 27, you've graduated, you're ready to build a life, but your paycheck barely covers rent. Saving money feels impossible, and owning a home, that feels nearly as far away as winning the lottery. Yet low wages are only half the story. Italy's youth unemployment has hovered around 30% for decades, not just during recessions, even in years when the economy was supposedly doing well. And for the lucky ones who do find a job, stability is rare. Think of short-term contracts, temporary positions, or roles with no path for growth. Many workers bounce from one short contract to another, never knowing if they'll still have a paycheck 3 months from now. That kind of uncertainty makes it very hard to build a future, start a family, or even plan your next year. So what happens when you combine low wages and high unemployment and zero stability? People leave. Every year, more than 50,000 young Italians pack up their bags and move abroad, to Germany, France, the UK, the United States, and beyond. And here's the painful irony. Italy educates them. Other countries profit from their skills. The Italian state pays for their childhood education, for their university degrees, for their training, often for 2 full decades of development. Then Germany or France hires them and enjoys the benefits of all that investment. This creates a loop that becomes harder to break every year. Talk to young Italians today, and many will tell you the same thing. I love my country, but I can't build a life here. Their decision isn't driven by disloyalty, it's driven by reality. Italy's future depends on its young workers, yet those same workers often feel they have no future inside Italy.
And so the people who could save the country's economy are choosing to save themselves instead. But losing young talent is only half the story. The people who stay face a completely different battle. If you want to understand why Italy stopped growing, you have to look at the engine under the hood: productivity.
Everything we've covered so far becomes even clearer once you see how slowly that engine has been moving. For the last 20 years, Italy's productivity has increased by only 0.2% per year. That means that an hour of work in Italy today produces only 4% more than it did in the 1990s. Imagine running a business where your output stays almost the same for decades while your costs rise every year. This is the environment Italian companies face, and it shapes everything from wages to competitiveness. Now let's look at the structure of Italy's economy. About 99% of Italian companies are small or medium-sized enterprises, often family-owned. This model helped Italy thrive in the 1980s. Small firms could adapt quickly, respond to niche markets, and build world-famous craft. It worked well in the age of flexible specialization, but global competition changed, and this model did not keep up. Today, many of these firms face the same set of obstacles. They are often too small to make the big investments that modern technology demands. Their resources are limited, which means scaling production or entering new markets becomes a slow and risky process. When they try to compete with large foreign companies, firms backed by deep capital, advanced machinery, and global networks, they enter that race already several steps behind. This leads to a paradox that surprises many people. Italy is still the seventh largest manufacturer in the world, yet inside these factories, much of the equipment is old, the methods come from earlier decades, and investment in innovation is low. It's like watching a professional athlete compete with world-class talent using equipment from 30 years ago. The skill is there, the tradition is there, the passion is there. The tools, however, belong to another era. Meanwhile, Italy's competitors move forward at full speed. Germany doubled down on automation and robotics. France built large corporate champions that could scale globally. Italy stayed in place because the economic model that once worked so well was never updated for a globalized economy driven by technology and scale. But the real pressure point becomes clear when we follow the money. Who earns it, who spends it, and who controls where it goes? Behind every slow reform, every stalled investment, and every political argument in Rome, there is one number that sets the boundaries for the entire economy. Italy now carries a debt load equal to about 150% of its GDP, one of the highest ratios in the developed world. This mountain of debt did not appear suddenly. It was built piece by piece, year after year, through cycles of budget deficits, unfinished reforms, and governments that change faster than policies could take effect. Imagine carrying a backpack that gets heavier every decade until it becomes part of your posture, and even walking forward becomes an effort. Today, that backpack weighs 2.8 trillion euros. But the real story isn't the size of the debt, it's the cost of keeping it at bay. Italy pays nearly 90 billion euros a year in interest alone. That is money that could fund modern schools, new infrastructure, better hospitals, or innovation programs. Instead, it goes to bondholders just to stand still. It's like paying rent on a house you can never own. Now add the rules to the Eurozone. Italy cannot weaken its currency to boost exports. It cannot print money to escape a debt spiral. Countries outside the euro sometimes use currency devaluation to regain competitiveness. Italy gave up that tool when it joined the common currency. The only path left is stronger productivity and deep structural reforms. Yet reforms struggle to survive long enough to work, and this leads us to the pressure point almost every economist mentions: political instability. Since World War II, Italy has gone through more than 65 governments. That means leaders change constantly, coalitions break apart, and long-term plans rarely reach the finish line. A tax reform begins, a government collapses, and the next cabinet rewrites it. A pension adjustment is passed, protests rise, and the policy is softened before results can appear. A growth plan is approved, but then early elections intervene. The result is simple. Policies come and go, but debt stays. And that debt grows larger every time political paralysis blocks a solution. It becomes a cycle where every postponed reform adds weight, every short-term fix pushes the problem forward, and every year the interest bill demands more from the budget. So Italy today is not paying for mistakes made last year or even last decade.
Italy is paying for 40 years of avoiding hard decisions, 40 years of choosing temporary comfort over long-term stability. And the key question now is how long that pattern can continue. Because Italy's debt machine does not slow down by itself. It accelerates when growth stalls, when politics freezes, and when confidence weakens. The next problem sits in the space between Italy's formal economy and everything that happens outside. And this is where things become even more complicated, because Italy is drained from both ends at the same time. Money escapes the system through the shadow economy, while bureaucracy slows down anyone who tries to work inside the system. It is like watching a country push the brakes and the accelerator at the same time and wondering why the engine starts to smoke. Italy's shadow economy is among the largest in Europe. Some estimates place it at up to a quarter of Italy's entire GDP. That means a significant share of work, services, and transactions never enter official records. They produce income, yes, but income that never reaches the tax system. For a country with high public debt and slow growth, this becomes a deep structural wound. When a quarter of the economy stays off the books, the state loses billions that could fund schools, infrastructure, or digital modernization. It also means honest businesses pay more because they carry the tax burden that others avoid. This creates an uneven playing field where those who respect the rules feel punished for it, and that frustration becomes fuel for even more informal activity. In some regions, especially in the South, criminal networks take advantage of these gaps and shape the local economy. But while the shadow economy drains the system, the other side of the problem slows it down. Italy's bureaucracy is famous for its complexity. Opening a simple business can take months. Every step requires forms, stamps, signatures, and visits to multiple offices. And these offices often still rely on paper documents and outdated procedures. For many entrepreneurs, especially young ones, the process becomes overwhelming before they even begin. Imagine wanting to start a bakery, a tech startup, or a small workshop. You prepare your idea, your savings, your plan, but before you can earn a single euro, you meet a wall of procedures. When progress depends on signatures that move slowly or officers that only work limited hours, every day becomes a negotiation with the system itself. And this slow pace has consequences. The more complicated the official path becomes, the more people turn to unofficial ones, not because they prefer it, but because they see no other way to survive. Bureaucracy becomes the trigger for the very shadow economy that weakens the state. Foreign investors notice this too. Italy is not a poor country. It has a strong manufacturing base, great engineers, world-class brands, and massive export potential. Investors admire these strengths, but they hesitate when they encounter the reality of Italy's administrative system. Innovation suffers when a startup needs months just to register, when research centers wait for approvals, when manufacturers face long days for simple permits. Creative energy fades. Many great ideas lose momentum before they never reach the market. And while other countries attract investors with streamlined systems and digital bureaucracy, Italy continues to rely on processes designed decades ago. The result is an economy where part of the activity runs underground, while the official economy moves slowly through layers of paperwork. One side avoids the rules entirely, the other gets trapped inside them, and both forces push Italy away from growth and deeper into stagnation. So the question is simple: can Italy still save itself? Only if its reforms can match the scale of the crisis. Without that, the Italian economy stays trapped between its past glory and an uncertain future. A beautiful postcard sitting on a fragile foundation. A country wealthy enough to avoid collapse, yet rigid enough to resist real change. And that leaves us with one final question. How long can a nation stay standing when its future generations have already started walking away?